Language is balance in terms of essence. Language should not and is not simply limited to beings, but even things are given the ability to express themselves through a language unique to them. In his essay, Building Dwelling Thinking, Martin Heidegger portrayed language as derived from a re-evaluation of essence as well as perception, the focus on the origin of a word. Architecture as an act of building puts forward the assembly of meaning through articulation and organization of form and space, where aspect, size, scale, rhythm, function, culture, and tectonics confer architecture its own language. Heidegger expresses architecture in his essay in the form of a bridge, which stands as a structure that of which does not just connect, but alternatively, the bridge is a thing that gathers, the bridge is a thing that initiates. Therefore, the bridge has its own expression of language, it represents a locale, which in turn gathers earth, sky, divinity, and morals to eventually allow for a sight. It is through various sets of models that we were able to materialize both the physical and conceptual order and touch on the relationship between structure, form, and space through rediscovering and re-engaging. In these attempts, I represented the notion of balance presented in a state of equilibrium between the weight of the wood as a material from one end and the weight of the paper from the other end, with a variation in positioning, slits, cuts, and folds between each of the three representations. In this representation, the cylinder itself is at state of balance, in contrast to the previous model where we had the cylinder as a base of the balance stick. The cuts and folds on both sides of the plane are the reason for this state of equilibrium. The cylinder is balanced by the weight of the folded paper. So whenever we cancel the fold on a certain side, the whole cylinder will lose balance and tilt to the other side. Setting kinetics allow to conceive a mechanism that can express idea and thought through a poetic representation. In this model, we reinterpreted the notion of space and void. The mechanism lay a kind of shield over the space below. It is by putting the mechanism together in a linear motion that generates the circular motion of the shield. The cylinder in this model helps ground the entire structure. Grounding itself helps sustain the whole unit that would eventually hold the shield. When the mechanism is closed in this model, the cylinders are combined into one from both edges, and all the elements are forming one entity. When we open the mechanism, the components are drawn apart, forming this cylindrical shape. But at the same time, the distortion of the shapes by this separation allows for a certain kind of shielding of the space in between. Through extensive graphic rendering, we were able to explore the relationship between spatial construct and human scale. With Lebanon facing an economic crisis and health crisis, the explosion added an unprecedented disaster that left more than around 200 people dead, 4,000 wounded, and 300,000 displaced away from their family space and their homes. When we think back on our life, we generally try to dwell on good times and come to terms with bad. The blast affected the social structure and created an immense barrier on the usual functioning of the society. Memories are a great part of suffering, that is the pain that makes life seem meaningless. So how do we reach positiveness in the negative, peace in the destruction? Bring back the resilience of all Lebanese people by reinventing hope, rebuilding and revitalizing Beirut and its community spirit. Healing by remaining attached to good memory of our loved ones with time. Healing by the attachment to faith. Collective tragedy creates collective memory and unity. Whether to demolish the silos due to the fear of collapse or proposing a tourist attraction on the site, these sparked an emotional debate among the city residents over how to preserve the memory of the tragedy. Some believe the government want to demolish the silos and move on as if nothing happened, to erase any memory of the responsibility of the government. The silos should stay to always remember, should stay as a mark of shame, remember the corruption, should stay as the symbol that shield a major part of the city, should stay from fear of similar scenario. The silo forever echoed the massive explosion. They are now part of the people's collective memory. A collective memory that was gradually demolished and erased through history. The city's identity is its memory, made up of layers of history that design the city spirit, its culture, which include its architecture and of course its people. Our beautiful Lebanese houses are one of the few left components of heritage that we need to save. Beirut's identity spans over 6 million years of habitat history. During the second half of the 19th century, Beirut witnessed a rapid urban transformation, driven by an economical growth due to the expansion of its port. Gemmayzeh and Marmkhail were among the first neighborhoods built once Beirut started expanding beyond its ancient city walls. The diverse building typography reflecting the evolution of residential architecture in Lebanese history. Before 1920, traditional houses with classical typography of a triple arcade were built, in addition to neo-traditional type with the transformation of the ground floor from residential to commercial. Between 1920 and 1930, buildings started to have a central bay, a veranda, a bay window. These houses are part of the Lebanese identity. They represent a major part in the city's history that is at risk of being erased. It was not the Lebanese war that caused the most destruction, but rather the 1949 rebuilding. The whole center of the city was literally and intentionally demolished by Solidaire. With it goes the memory. And now, after the blast, we face the danger to lose the last remaining of this heritage. Around 600 historic buildings were damaged, including many structures at a risk of collapse. These buildings are part of Beirut's identity and collective memory. They represent the common good and the possibility of what we can still be.
Through our study of kinetics, I applied this mechanism that is a linear push and pull movement, creating a kind of a rotation. This model is represent all cylindric, linear, and plane element. When the mechanism is closed and the model is closed, the element in both ends create one entity. Both cylinder and both edges are combined into one cylinder, but whenever I apply or the mechanism with the push and pull, the cylinder are drawn apart, and however by this action a kind of a shield is created for the space in between.